Hello, I'm Jim Timilty, and welcome to Beacon Hill Update, a periodic program where I update you on issues of the day. Today I'm joined by my friend and mentor, Representative Lou Kafka of Sharon. Welcome, Representative.
Senator, good to see you today.
Great to have you. Well, Lou, what I wanted to talk about is many things, but mainly about your Hall of Fame career, I feel, up here. I've mentioned on the floor of the Senate on a couple of occasions during formal session how you and I were collaborating on things, and I thought that through your years of service with Representative Keating and then Senator Keating, a dynamic duo from the town of Sharon, that you were a Hall of Fame staffer in the Senate who has moved seamlessly into a role in leadership in the House of Representatives and have had, as I say, a Hall of Fame career. And I remember interacting with you when you worked for Senator Keating in a couple of instances, just as a young man with a recommendation from Senator Keating, and it was index cards. And now that I've joined you up here over the last 6 terms, I've noticed how things have changed dramatically for us in the Senate and the House with the technology upgrades that we have. So I just wanted your perspective as you reflect from moving from index cards and typewriters, as I knew growing up as a boy visiting my father, but how you've moved from that to social media, instantaneous updates through State House News. But just wanted you to reflect on the changes, for the good in technology. And
again, thank you for the kind words. Hall of Fame is a bit much in my opinion, but it's been an enjoyable career up here in this building. And as you mentioned, I started working in 1979 for Bill Keating as his legislative aide in the House. I spent 6 years with him in the House and then went over to the Senate for 6 years as his chief of staff. And it's been, that part of my career was very enjoyable, and learning the ropes in the building, the process. And when I was elected as state representative, I hit the ground running, knowing the process, knowing a lot of the people in the building, and that really helped a lot. But back in those days, you're right, we worked exclusively off of index cards, paper, telephone, and that extensively was it. And then meeting the constituents face to face whenever possible. And now today we have the computers, as you said, social media. I know yesterday we took a couple of pictures here in the State House, and before I got back to my office, they were up on Facebook and Twitter. I mean, and that's incredible. Yeah. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, you never would have thought that was even possible. And the advent of computerizing all the offices has made people, in some respects, made people's jobs a lot easier than they were when I first started in the building, and certainly when your father was in the building.
Yeah. It's instantaneous, because I think I do have, and I think there's many people who now are on Facebook and have their circle of friends, and then they go back and forth, that there's some expectation that you can get immediately right back. And I think I learned that at an early age, and you having been somebody who worked in the staff and then moved over, must have been a very easy transition. I came in knowing, I would say through efforts politically, having run before and being personal friends with some other members, that I had known 25% of the body. I was lucky enough to receive my first chair as the chair of municipalities. So with all the home rules that come through, almost you get to meet in 6 months a good deal of both bodies, because they come in and bring their elected officials, and it's a good committee because you get to say yes. But I think back to my rookie year on legislation and papers from the House and the rules of the Senate, and understanding that, and being on your own. It's very important to have some relationships, but there were times where you got lost in those rules. I mean, if you were working with another member, or unfortunately sometimes working against a member, say for instance somebody with the years of service and the mastery of the rules, like D.A. Morrissey. But if there was an issue and one did come up, and he would go through the rules for you, and you would find yourself that even though you thought you had the superior argument and you might have thought you had the numbers, that very quickly he reminded you that that's something you have to dedicate your time to, because even though we've got the computers, we've got the the instantaneous email that goes back and forth, and you got the spell check, and you can do the new drafts, and then they don't have to go from office to office by that way. If you're not ready to deal with some of the rules that we had when John Adams, or formulated when John Adams was working,
and even more so, even with all that instantaneous communication ability, when you're dealing at least within the building and the process and trying to get things done, nothing replaces the face-to-face contact and conversation with your colleague.
Yeah.
And again, going back to when I worked for Bill, when he was in the Senate for a period of time, he was chairman back in those days of the Senate Committee on Steering and Policy. And I was the unofficial clerk of that committee and did a lot of the paperwork in anticipation of the daily calendar and schedule within the Senate. So fast forward many years, I became, thanks to the Speaker, chairman of the House Committee on Steering and Policy. So to me, it was just a seamless, again, I just went into that chairmanship knowing the process, knowing how it worked, knowing how I would have to communicate with my colleagues in both the House and the Senate, and even in the governor's office, on trying to get bills done, and in some cases slowing them down so differences could be worked out even before they hit the House floor. And so it all in all, it's been a great career up here, and something that I've enjoyed, with the exception maybe of the commute every day.
Yeah.
That's become, going back to when I first started for Bill, you could leave this building in the afternoon before 4 o'clock or after 6 o'clock and avoid traffic. Now traffic seems like it's 24/7 almost. And you can't avoid getting into a traffic jam. So in all those years, I've learned maybe 4 or 5 different alternate routes using back roads to get from here back to the district.
It changes every day. I think when I first started in 2005, I thought that I had, at least a handle on when would be a good time and when wouldn't, and realized very quickly that, maybe my best effort, well, the best expectation I had during good weather was maybe the train was a good option. But then when assigned the Public Safety Committee, and then this year by the Senate President of the Public Service Committee at the same time, there are obligations that require you to be, and as you're one of 160 or one of 140 for the Commonwealth, you have a vote and you have a role, and you see that when there is a controversial issue and everybody comes in, but you're expected to be, and I think both branches have agreed that occasionally, on a significant matter, we're going to take our committees to you. We're not just going to make you come up here to Gardner, but we're going to work. We're going to try to get to all 4 corners of the state, and I think that's something that's positive when you bring the building. I always talk to people that if they had an idea, if they had come up and they took a look at what happens, I think they'd be very surprised at the collegial nature of what we do, but how close they can get to their government. They can come into a formal session or an informal session and sit in the gallery and watch the interaction. They'll have a tough time maybe with some of the language and the banter back and forth, but if they want to come in to a public committee and to a public hearing, they can talk to their representative, but they can also talk to the committee chair and the whole committee as itself. Sign up, wait in line, and you're gonna be heard on any matter that you want, because this process, I think they get confused with what happens in Congress, that sometimes there's a Democrat-Republican divide, and for other influences besides just party, that nothing can get done. But up here, it is a good collaboration, and I don't think there's a clearer message on that part than the opioid bill that was signed just recently.
Yeah, and I mean that was a collaboration between the governor's office, the House, and the Senate, both parties involved, both the Republicans and Democrats, and there were differences in the Senate bill to the House bill, but the compromise was made, and I think we, as the governor said at his press conference, we have a bill that is something the rest of the nation can look at and copy. And I think over time it'll not only save lives, but and save families.
And that's something. I think some people look at the legislative process and they wonder why it takes so long. But there are influences, and very important influences on that, in both the medical community, the insurance community, in parents, in people who work as advocates, and people whose profession there is. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a different idea. There is a cost with some ideas and some not. Some that you can. There's never going to be a time where there's enough money to address all the ills that we want. I don't think that it ever has. I remember somebody who was in office much longer than me had said, even when there was money, and that's in the late 90s when mm-hmm. Wall Street and business and everything was going very well. Even when there was money, there was no money. So it's always,
there'll never be enough money, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. Because as I was explaining to a group of people the other day, you have this huge pie, and you have 200 legislators that are trying to. This is, doing the budget. 200 legislators who have priorities in dealing with the hundreds, if not thousands, of line items. I never really totaled up all the different line items, but they're a significant number. And we all have our priorities. And every one of us, within our priorities, feel that they're all the important line items. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even going to the education line item or the local aid line item, which everybody supports and wants to get the most money they can for their districts. But all the other line items, whether they're public safety, public service, education, higher education, environment, and so on and so forth, there would never be enough money to fund everything that the advocates are looking for.
Right. That was an eye-opening moment, one of many. But when I first started, was not just dealing with my own legislative package in the municipalities committee, but also the faces behind each one of those mm-hmm. line items, because that's what I use. There's a human person impacted. Mm-hmm. There's a group of people that are impacted, and what I think is very effective on that part is they come up and they talk to us about what that is. And one of the ones, and it's always been a priority of yours, but working on those with disabilities. Mm-hmm. And in particular, I remember a parent calling me, and my daughter had just been born and was 18 months when I encountered my first budget. And I was amazed. He talked about family and respite services, which I know mm-hmm. that's a priority of yours, but that can mean so much to one individual. It's a certain amount of money, but what she broke it down for me was that she had a child with very specific 24/7, 365 mm-hmm. challenges that was necessary to have a critical care nurse working on that. But what she broke it down to was it's taking a shower, it's being able to go shopping. It's something. There's some items in that budget that really make a huge difference.
But it doesn't just go to the individual that needs those services. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, it keeps the family together as a unit. Yeah. Because oftentimes, because of the money situation or the time situation, things happen and families split over those issues. So this can save families and keep them as a unit.
Yeah, that's.
And another program that I've fought for years and years and years is early intervention. In early intervention, from birth to 3 years old, provides services for those infants and children, young children who are developmentally challenged. Mm-hmm. But we spend money then and hopefully save money in special education costs down the road. And luckily, the various chairmen of Ways and Means in the House, speakers in the House have seen that it's worth investing that money early. And so those are things that you fight for. And if you can help one family at least, or one individual at least, that fight, it's worth the fight.
Yes.
And that's how I look at things going forward in trying to, whether it's money in the budget or legislation that will do similar things, will save people's lives or whatever. Recently had a bill, a family in Sharon lost a daughter to a gentleman who was driving on a suspended license. We filed legislation in response to that requires the registry, when someone's license is suspended, to let the local police departments know of the suspension, so they can look to see and make sure that that person is not driving around town on that suspended license, and particularly if the suspension is due to reckless driving or speeding or any other on-road violations. And we were successful with your help, Senator, to get that passed. The governor signed it, and I met with the registrar not too long ago, and she informed me that it's beginning to work, that they're getting some feedback. And
that's great. And under your leadership, with your experience and knowledge of the rules, that as we were coming down the stretch, and there are so many priorities that need just a little nudge that last day, and as it shrinks, as you get to that bottleneck, that I think one of our roles, and I talk about it quite frequently, is to advocate on behalf of our constituents with the state agency. With the agency, as I always say, that's not accountable and doesn't have to answer right away. Maybe don't see that individual problem and that individual change that can make a significant difference down the road for public safety. And knowing that there were priorities and there were some other controversies that were coming up, that having the ability to maybe change the mind of some committees who are focused on other things, but knowing the rule that you gave me about what we could do down the stretch in Ways and Means to maybe move a bill out that just didn't have the priority because they weren't certain, and the state agency wasn't recommending it, so you're in a little bit of a limbo, and sitting in that chamber for the rest of the day with you down the hall waiting for me to make certain we could either do that quorum call, which would kind of stop some other initiatives that were going. It made a few other members mad, but just so that you stay in long enough so that you make that small change that potentially one day will save a life. I like to talk to some of the children in schools, and it was a great bipartisan, but a great bicameral effort on state 911. We got a bill that reformed the statewide emergency telecommunications board into the Mass State 911 in a little over 7 months' time. That's because we had the cooperation of everyone. It was viewed as maybe a fee, an augmentation in what people had to pay for a particular service, but I think through guidance and through help, you were in steering policy at that time, we were able to make an effective change, and 911 gets $25 million a year since 2008 annually, and that goes for hardware, goes for software, goes for training, it even goes for seats, because we know these people are going to be sitting there 8 hours a day, sometimes 16, saving lives. And it's nice as you look back at the opiate bill, and I look back at that bill and other bills that we've done, but you're going to have a chance to potentially save a life. And having something like that, it makes you go home and feel pretty good. I think sometimes it's not like you're a carpenter or a builder. You make a lot of efforts, and I think you try to make a lot of people happy and make some change and do some things, but it's tough to get a point where you're like, we really had a good day today, and I think we're going to save a life. But I think the entire legislature can say that after that opiate bill, the Commonwealth's in a better place. But we do know with the overwhelming tide that is that epidemic, how easy it is to get in and how hard it is to get out.
Definitely.
That we're gonna be revisiting that.
Well, we're going to improve on what we've begun.
Yes.
Not revisit. I think we don't have to. It's a constant struggle on behalf of those people who are suffering from the disease, it's incumbent upon us to keep that issue at the forefront. And as we get some feedback as to what we've done, we have to then look to what we can do to make it even better.
Yeah, and it's not that the legislature just woke up to this problem,
Right.
which some have intimated. Because when it was my first year in the legislature, where leadership at that point had dedicated a committee to mental health and substance abuse, and the various chairs in that have been dedicated. But I think that gives an idea to people of the scope of the problem. And I know just a couple of years ago when we went down this path, and there was there's a give and take on everything about maybe it being an unfunded mandate, but this is in an early iteration. We worked on what's happening in schools, so that you have a chance as a child is growing up to give them an idea of the dangers and the life of misery that can result if you dabble in this, because that maybe not. I don't know if I have the background, but might not have been that way when I was growing up. And you, as a huge Celtic fan, I was 16 when poor Len Bias passed away. At the time, we thought it was just one first experience, but it left an indelible impression at the right time for me to think that nobody in my circle of friends would ever think of touching or going near that substance. It's sad that a tragedy came about, but I think that us working very hard in the schools is going to make a significant difference, hopefully for all families, but certainly many.
I can't agree with you more. I just wanted to take the opportunity also to thank you as a member of the delegation, as we call it, and everything collectively we've been able to do throughout the years for the town of Walpole.
Well, I think that
it's certainly our ability to collaborate and to agree to work for the benefit of the people of Walpole has shown some very positive results over the years.
Well, you're very kind. I think one of the best things that's happened to the town of Walpole is you getting the precincts that you did, because you've been very attentive to the town. Frankly, there were a few years, and if it wasn't for your guidance, your leadership, the brainchild of Representative John Rogers some years ago, and I talk about it quite a bit because it's had an enormous impact on the town of Walpole. But the prison mitigation money, you standing with me and Representative Rogers, Paul McMurtry, Sean Dooley, you standing with us, and your ability, your relationships, and your influence in the House of Representatives made an inordinate difference.
I can only remember Chairman Dempsey, Brian Dempsey, was chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. John and I walked into his office one day, and he just sat there and smiled and said, "I'm in trouble," because of John's knowledge of how Ways and Means works and my relationships, as you mentioned. He was certainly at a disadvantage. And
I said to you, I don't know if all my neighbors know what a pivotal role, and you had just said, which you showed me, you're the great golf swing. It's so smooth and it has such great results. He says, I'm happy to share this good news with my colleagues, and I'll never forget that. I think it gave me a great lesson. And you're my mentor and my friend. I can't thank you enough for all the time you've spent with me and then doing the show. Think the world of you, and I could talk all day with Representative Lou Kafka, but that's all the time we have. I hope you enjoyed. Look forward to seeing you next time on Beacon Hill Update. Thanks, Jim Timilty signing off. Thanks, Mr. Leader. Great.
Thank you.
That was a great